I shouldn't be writing this. Even now, as I put these words down, I feel a quiet, constant pressure in the back of my mind. A warning that I'm going to do something I agreed never to do. I signed the forms, swore the oaths. This account may cost me everything. But some truths grow too large and too heavy to keep inside, no matter the consequences. So let me start simply. My name is David, and for the past 6 months, I've worked as an archives technician at a government records facility. It's a squat cement building on the edge of downtown, unremarkable on the outside, the kind of place you drive past without a second glance. Inside, it's a labyrinth of fluorescent lit corridors and windowless rooms filled with steel shelves. We call those rooms the stacks, where millions of documents lie in acid-free boxes under the steady gaze of security cameras. The air always smells faintly of old paper and dust, kept dry and cooled by an industrial HVAC system that never shuts off. The hum of the vents became the background music of my life. When I first started the job, I actually loved that hum. It was comforting in its consistency, a soft reminder that the environment was controlled, safe, preserved. I loved the solitude of the stacks as well. I've never been the sort of person who minds being alone. In fact, that was part of the appeal of the job. My days, and often nights, were spent quietly retrieving files, cataloguing new arrivals, and digitizing fragile records by the glow of a scanning machine. Occasionally I'd assist a visiting researcher or a government clerk looking for a specific file, but most of the time it was just me among the shelves, lost in my own thoughts. At least that's what I believed at first. My supervisor, Mr. Alvarez, was a veteran archivist near retirement. He was a kindly man with a habit of wearing whimsical ties. I recall my first day he wore one patterned with a blue sunflower. During daytime hours he oversaw the preservation lab upstairs, and he let me handle the evening retrieval shifts on my own. "You're a night owl, right?" He'd joke when I volunteered for the late schedule. I'd nodded. It was true. I preferred the quiet, and it meant I could pursue my college classes in the morning. So it worked out for both of us. He trusted me with the keys to the stacks and alarm codes, and in those first couple of months nothing unexpected ever happened on my watch. I would clock in around 4 p.m, when a few other staff were finishing up, and by 6 p.m. the place was mine until midnight or later. A security guard named Ellis stayed in the lobby of the ground floor for safety, but we rarely saw each other. Different floors, different routines. In those early weeks, I found a strange kind of peace in the routine. There was a rhythm to it. Sign out a cart, navigate to whichever row and shelf held the file or box I needed, double check the reference numbers under the cold glow of my flashlight. The overhead lights in the deep storage sections were motion activated and on timers, plunging half the corridor into darkness if I stood still for too long. Then I would trundle the cart back to the main processing room, log the item onto the computer system, and either scan it or leave it for whoever requested it. Some nights I had specific tasks, like reshelving materials from that day's research visit or checking humidity gauges. Mundane work, but satisfying in its own quiet way. If anything, I occasionally worried that the job was too quiet. I remember half wondering if I'd get bored eventually. Then the quiet began to change, in small ways at first. The first odd thing I remember was a voice, just a whisper really. It was about 2 months into the job, on a Tuesday night. I was in one of the deeper aisles of the stacks, far from the main hall, searching for a box of old municipal ledgers. The overhead lights had clicked off due to my lack of movement, leaving me in darkness except for the beam of my flashlight. It was silent down there. Even the HVAC hum was distant. I was reaching up to the top shelf when I thought I heard someone whisper my name. David, came the sound. So soft I wasn't sure it was real. I lowered my arm and turned, sweeping the flashlight behind me. Nothing but concrete walls and rows of shelves greeted me. I called out, half hoping one of the daytime staff might have lingered as a prank. My voice echoed faintly, then fell flat. No answer. For a moment, I stood there, heart thumping in my ears, telling myself I'd misheard. Maybe the ventilation whooshing through a vent had sounded like a whisper. Or perhaps someone upstairs said something that carried oddly through the ducts. It was easy to explain it away, and that's exactly what I did. I forced a chuckle at my own jumpiness, grabbed the ledger box, and hurried back to the lit corridor. By the time I returned to the processing room, I'd nearly forgotten about the voice. It's a concrete building, I told myself. Old structures make weird noises all the time, and the mind plays tricks in the dark. But small incidents kept adding up. A week or two later, I found a single file lying out on the table in the records processing room when I came in at dusk. It was a thin manila folder with a case number I didn't recognize. I frowned, wondering if Mr. Alvarez had left it out for me to do something with. He hadn't mentioned it in his handover notes though. I flipped it open and found it empty. Just the case number on the tab, no contents at all. That was strange. Normally an empty folder would be labeled as such or discarded. I checked the number against our database. According to the system, that record number hadn't been checked out recently, nor was it scheduled for any requests. In fact, the database indicated the file was still supposed to be in storage. Perhaps someone pulled it and forgot to log it, I thought. It wouldn't be the first time a stressed researcher or a careless clerk bypassed protocol. Still, leaving an empty folder out didn't make sense. I wandered over to the aisle where that file should have been, and sure enough, the spot was empty. Someone had taken it out. Maybe Alvarez had done some cleaning and left it, meaning to ask me to find the contents. Or else the security guard got curious during a round. Both seemed unlikely, but I shrugged it off as a benign mystery. I placed the folder in our refile cart and made a note to mention it to Mr. Alvarez the next day. When I did bring it up, Alvarez just furrowed his brow. He had no recollection of handling that file.
Could be one of the researchers misplaced it. I'll keep an eye out,
he said. Then, with half smile,
maybe our resident ghost is nosing around.
He said it in a joking way, but I noticed he didn't entirely dismiss the oddity. Regardless, an empty file wasn't exactly a pressing concern. It went into the backlog to be found or replaced eventually. One night, a few days after the empty folder incident, I left the archives around midnight as usual. The next afternoon when I came in, I ran into Ellis, the security guard at the lobby sign-in. Ellis gave me an odd look.
You decided to pull an all-nighter yesterday? He asked.
I shook my head, confused. I'd clocked out at 12:07 a.m., same as always. Els frowned. Huh? After you signed out, I could have sworn I heard movement up on the 3. Thought maybe you came back, or maybe Alvarez was doing a surprise inspection or something. I even called up the stairwell, but nobody answered. I felt a small chill creep up my arms. I hadn't returned upstairs, and Alvarez certainly wasn't coming in after midnight. If Ellis heard something, who or what was it? I tried to play it off with a smile. But probably just the building settling or draft pushing stuff around, I offered. The lobby had a way of amplifying echoes from the upper floors. It could have been anything. Ellis grunted. Maybe. Sounded like a footfalls to me. But these old places, yeah. Maybe just the pipes. He didn't sound convinced, but we both let it drop. What else was there to say? No sign of forced sentry had shown up on the monitors, and nothing was missing as far as we knew. It was just another odd little event that could be shrugged away if we tried hard enough. That evening, I texted my friend Alex while on my dinner break, telling him half-jokingly that I might be working in a haunted building. He responded with laughing emojis and asked if I'd been watching horror movies alone in the dark again. I didn't press the issue. I didn't want to sound actually worried. Honestly, I wasn't even sure what I was. Unnerved? Yes. But also rational enough to know how flimsy these incidents sounded. A whisper that was probably air ducts. An empty file folder that someone probably misplaced. Strange noises that could have been anything. If I went around seriously claiming these were connected or supernatural, I'd get chuckled out of the room. So I did what I'd learned to do best. I rationalized it and carried on. In fact, after that conversation with Alex, things stayed quiet for a while. A couple of uneventful weeks passed. I focused on my routine and my classes, and gradually I stopped thinking about the oddities. It was amazing how easily the mind can smooth over unknowns when you're busy. The archives were peaceful again, just the way I liked it. At least that's what I told myself. Until the night where I could no longer explain away what was happening. It started with footsteps. I was pushing a cart through Stack 2B late one evening, having just finished reshelving a set of records. The wheels squeaked faintly with each turn. I remember that particular detail because when I paused to catch my breath, the squeaking continued for a second longer than it should have. Almost like an echo, but not quite. It took me a moment to realize I was just hearing another set of wheels or footsteps, somewhere further in the darkness of the stacks, just around the corner of the next row. I felt a prickling on my neck. Hello? I called out, voice reverberating off concrete. Ellis, is that you? The guard usually stayed downstairs unless something was wrong, so I doubted it was him, and Mr. Alvarez had gone home hours ago. The only reply was a faint scuffing sound, like a shoe dragging briefly on the floor. My pulse quickened. It crossed my mind that perhaps a researcher or staff member had gotten locked in after closing. A benign explanation. I pulled out my phone and flicked on the flashlight app. My work flashlight was on the cart, 10 feet behind me. With a tentative step, I rounded the corner into the adjacent aisle. A tall shadow blotted the far end of the aisle, just for an instant. I swear, For a heartbeat, I saw the outline of a person standing there at the edge of the light's reach. A figure taller than me, lanky, maybe wearing a long coat. The instant my light fell on it, it moved. Not gone, but moved, slipping out of sight behind a shelving unit with a shuffling stride that was unmistakably human. My throat went dry. "Hey, you're not allowed back there," I shouted, trying to sound authoritative despite the quaver in my voice. Adrenaline surged as I gave chase, hurried steps echoing. Turning into the next aisle, I caught a flicker of movement at the far end, something disappearing behind the next row. The stacks were arranged in a grid, and whoever it was seemed to be moving in a parallel aisle, one step ahead of me. They weren't running exactly, but the way they glided just beyond my line of sight made my skin crawl. I sped up and rounded another corner sharply. My flashlight beam cut across rows of identical archive boxes, and there, maybe 30 feet away down the center walkway, was the silhouette. Clearer this time. Definitely a person, but oddly indistinct in the gloom. They were standing very still between the towering shelves of documents, watching me. I froze. "Who are you?" The beam of my phone's light wavered slightly in my trembling hand. The figure stood motionless. For a second, I thought maybe it was a cardboard cutout or a coat hung on a rack. Some optical illusion. But then I realized that I could make out the glint of two eyes catching the light. A face, pale and blank, staring in my direction from the darkness. That broke the spell. I took a step forward, anger and fear rising in equal measure. If this was some trespasser or a prank, I had to put a stop to it. "I'm calling security. Stay where you are," I barked, fumbling to pull the walkie-talkie from my belt. In a split second, my eyes left the aisle. I heard a rapid shuffling. By the time I snapped my gaze back up, the aisle was empty. The figure had vanished. Heart pounding, I rushed down the aisle to where the person had stood, shining my light into every nook. Nothing. Just a faint hint of something, an odor? The air smelled slightly of ozone. Like after a lightning strike, mixed with the stale paper scent of the stacks. I coughed, the sharp tingle in my nose unpleasant and metallic. Ellis's voice cracked over the walkie-talkie strapped to my hip, startling me. I realized belatedly I'd pressed the call button in my panic. "David, you alright up there?" he was saying, concern evident. "I heard shouting." I raised the device to my mouth, scanning the surrounding shadows one more time. "There's somebody in the stacks," I hissed quietly, still catching my breath. "I saw someone. I think they're hiding." He responded immediately. "On my way up. Lock the stairwell door so they can't slip down here." I sprinted to the stairwell entrance and slammed the heavy door shut, twisting the push bar lock. My mind was racing. If there truly was an intruder, how did they get in without Ellis noticing? The building access required a keycard after hours. And why would they play this cat and mouse game with me? Moments later, Ellis arrived, keys jangling. He was slightly out of breath and had one hand on his holstered taser as a precaution. Together, we did a thorough search of every aisle, every unlocked room, even the crawl spaces and old dumbwaiter shaft. We found no one, not a single sign of a person, no footprints in the dusty corners, no displaced boxes or papers aside from those I had knocked over during my chase. The only thing out of the ordinary was that lingering faint whiff of ozone that both of us noticed in the air. After an hour, we had to conclude whoever I saw was gone, or perhaps never there to begin with. I could tell Ellis was unnerved. "Maybe they slipped out before I got up here," he muttered, scratching his head. "But the only exit was the stairwell door you locked." We both stood in the corridor, perplexed. He checked the feed from the security cameras on his phone. There were a few in the main hallway of the archives. Oddly, one camera covering the corridor outside the stacks level had recorded only static during the approximate time I was chasing the intruder. Every other camera was fine, but that one feed was awash of grey fuzz. Ellis showed me the clip, shaking his head. "Damn thing's been reliable up until now. Figures it dies right when we need it." The next day, I sat down with Mr. Alvarez and Ellis to file the incident report. In the light of the morning, describing the shadowy figure I'd seen felt surreal. Ellis backed me up about the camera glitch and the ozone smell, but beyond that, we had nothing concrete. Alvarez listened with a grave expression. He didn't laugh or dismiss it. If anything, he seemed deeply concerned. "We'll increase the security sweeps, and I'll see about getting that camera replaced," he said. "David, if you want someone with you during the evening shifts for a while, we can arrange that." I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. He probably thought I was shaken up enough to quit. I assured him I'd be alright, but accepted the offer to have another guard do an extra walkthrough later at night. Truthfully, I was more rattled than I let on. I hadn't gotten much sleep. I kept jolting awake thinking I heard those footsteps in my apartment. Even in the shower that morning, I'd felt absurdly like I was being watched. My irrational mind fought it, but the unease had dug in deep. Before I left Alvarez's office, something occurred to me. "Sir, could someone have accessed our system? Like, if they got in, maybe they were after data instead of physical files." It was a long shot, but I'd remember those odd database discrepancies and suddenly they seemed more sinister. Alvarez frowned. "What do you mean?" I told him about the empty folder and how I'd checked the database, and how sometimes the system logs seemed off. In fact, after the incident the night before, I'd spent an extra hour in the computer system cross-referencing records, just to make sure nothing had been tampered with. That's when I found it. A checkout entry for a file under my username at 3:14 AM, hours after I had gone home. According to the log, I had signed out a file from a collection we hadn't touched in months, but I had done no such thing. I showed the printout to Alvarez. He rubbed his temples. "Could be a software error, or maybe you left your terminal logged in and someone..." He didn't finish, and we both knew the scenario didn't make sense. Even I had somehow left the session open. Who would be using it at 3 AM in a locked building? The intruder, if there was one, would have needed not only to break in but also to know how to navigate our database and specifically use my credentials. Alvarez's face had gone a shade paler by the time he carefully said, "Alright, I'll forward this to IT and see if they can trace it. In the meantime, keep an eye out for any other anomalies. And David," he paused, weighing his words, "if you need a break, I want to switch to day shifts for a while. Just say the word. No shame in it." I nodded, thanking him, but declined the shift change for now. Part of me wanted nothing more than to escape those lonely corridors for good. But another part of me felt stubborn determination, maybe even a responsibility to see this through. This archive had started to feel like my area, my watch. I wasn't ready to abandon it, whatever was happening, at least not yet. That night, despite everything, I returned to the stacks. True to his word, Alvarez arranged for an extra patrol. Another guard from the day shift swung by around 8 PM to check in on me, then left when all appeared calm. By 9 PM I was alone again. I kept the lights on full in the main corridors, and I brought a portable radio from the office so I could call for help quickly, if needed. Every rustle of paper or creak of the building made my muscles tense. Still, for the first few hours nothing happened. I began to relax slightly, falling back into my work, convincing myself that maybe the previous night's intruder had been a one-off burglar who got spooked. Around 11:30 PM, I was at my desk in the processing room, reviewing digitized images on the computer. That's when the desk phone rang. The landline rarely ever rang at night. Usually any calls that late were automated alerts or wrong numbers. I picked up. "Archives. This is David." Silence. Then a faint static hiss. "Hello?" I repeated. A prickle of dread coiling in my gut. Through the static, I thought I heard a voice, but it was so distorted I couldn't make out words. It sounded almost like a person speaking underwater, slow and gargled. My own voice came out in a shaky whisper. "Who is this?" For a moment, nothing but soft crackling. I was about to hang up when suddenly the line cleared just enough that I heard fragments of a word, or a word-like sound. "Watching." The line popped and hissed. Again. "You." The rest was lost in a swell of static that abruptly cut to silence. The call disconnected. I realized I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. With a shaky hand I set the receiver down. My heart was hammering. The call had come from an unknown number, according to the small display. Trying to steady my breathing, I dialed back the last incoming number out of reflex. An automated voice told the number was not in service. Of course it wasn't. I sat there, mind racing. Was this intruder taunting me? Or was it something else entirely? I recalled that bizarre ozone smell and the ghostly figure that vanished. "We're watching you," is what I thought I'd heard. Not we. Could it be a prank? Some elaborate hazing by the staff? That level of tech know-how and commitment seemed unlikely, and why tug at me? A sudden buzz in my pocket made me jump. It was my cell phone vibrating. I nearly dropped it in my fumbling. It was a text from Alex. You up? How's it going?" He knew I'd be at work. Swallowing, I decided to tell him the truth this time, or at least part of it. "Not great. Weird stuff is happening again." I tapped back, fingers shaking. "Saw someone last night in the building, and just now I got a creepy call." The 3 dots of him typing blinked on screen for what felt like a long time before his reply came. What kind of weird? Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? I started to respond, but before I could finish, the desk phone rang again, loud in the quiet. I flinched hard, staring at it. Alex's text bubble showed he was still typing, probably a follow-up. I slowly reached for the ringing phone, afraid of hearing that distorted voice again. When I answered, though, it was Ellis's voice that greeted me. "Everything alright up there?" the guard asked. "I just got an alert. The system flagged an unauthorized access attempt on one of the secure collections. Some kind of bulk lookup." "I'm heading to the secure stacks to check it out," I told Ellis, already moving. The secure collection was a climate-controlled room behind a coded door down the hall, a place we kept sensitive or valuable records. At this hour, no one should have been accessing it, and certainly not in bulk. As I approached the thick metal door of the secure room, I noticed the keypad's red light was blinking, indicating the door was ajar. My heart lurched. I hadn't entered this area in days, and only a handful of people even had the code. I pushed the door and it swung open easily. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by a few monitor LEDs and the glow of a simple green computer terminal in the corner. I hadn't seen that terminal used in ages. It was an old standalone system that once indexed microfilms. Now its screen was awake, fluorescent green text on black background, flickering with lines of code. A faint mechanical ch-ch-ch sound made me jump. On a table near the terminal, our aging dot matrix printer, something we kept around for printing labels, was running. The printer had glided back and forth, printing on a continuous feed paper. Sheet after sheet of perforated paper was spooling onto the floor in a loose pile. Someone must have triggered a massive print job. I took a hesitant step forward, eyes fixed on the cascading paper. The air in here felt colder than the hallway, and that same electric metallic ozone scent was strong. As I got closer, I could see the printed text. It didn't look like labels or reports. It looked like sentences. Blocks of text forming paragraphs, each line prefaced by a timestamp. I picked up the length of paper that had already printed and read a line. 23:30:02. Subject D. Alvarez has left the premises. Monitoring continues. Below it, another timestamp. Subject D. Hayward has returned to desk, reviewing digitized files. Subject appears calm. I staggered back a step. This was describing now, or moments ago. I skimmed further down the printout, hands shaking violently. Subject D. Hayward receives anomalous phone communication. Content delivered. Subject distressed. Subject D. Hayward is responding to external contact. Subject A. fielding via text message. Subject D. Hayward proceeds to secure collection in response to triggered event. The words were printing out in real time, right in front of me. I watched as the next line unfurled from the machine with the whine. Subject D. Hayward observes output. A chill rippled through my entire body. They were watching everything, minute by minute, second by second. Not just watching, but documenting, cataloging, in perfect detail. I felt exposed in a way that defies description, as if my very thoughts were being itemized on that awful green bar paper. Behind me, the door suddenly slammed shut with a resounding clang. I jumped and whirled around. I could see through the reinforced glass window on the door that Ellis had arrived. He was yanking at the handle. His face was a mix of worry and confusion. I ran to pull it open, but the lock wouldn't disengage even when I entered the code. It was as if some invisible force had bolted it. Over the printer's noise, a new sound rose, the computer's terminal speakers crackling to life. The static was violent, filling the small room with a roar. I pressed my hands over my ears, backing away as the green text on the screen began to scroll faster. Amid the blocky cascade of text, I caught glimpses of words. Anomaly, breach, containment. Ellis was shouting my name, slamming his shoulder against the door. The lights in the secure room flickered, then went out entirely, leaving only the terminal's glow and the intermittent spark of light from the hall window as Ellis tried to use his flashlight to see in. I stumbled towards the door in darkness, guided by that flashlight beam. In the dim flicker, I saw movement behind me and to the side. A shape that hadn't been there a second before. Two shapes. They stood in the corner of the room, blacker than black in the absence of light. Humanoid outlines, tall and still. I couldn't see eyes or faces, but I felt their attention, like a pressure on my skin. My throat seized in a scream that never made it out. Panic overtook me. I pounded on the door with both fists. "Let me out!" I cried, barely hearing my own voice over the static and the heartbeat thudding in my ears. The silhouettes in the corner did not move, but somehow I knew they were coming closer. Not by sight. I still couldn't see them move, but with each blink they seemed nearer. Suddenly, the door gave way and I tumbled out into the corridor, practically colliding with Ellis. He dragged me back, his flashlight beam swinging into the room. In its stark light, there was nothing there. No figures. And now the terminal was dark. The printer stopped. The room was silent and empty, save for the mess of paper on the floor. We stood there panting. My legs nearly gave out. I had to brace against the wall. Ellis kept the light trained on the now still printer, his hand tightly gripping my arm as if to assure himself I was real. After a long moment, he spoke, voice trembling. "What in God's name, David? What was that?" I had no answer for Ellis. All I could do was shake my head, looking down. I realized I still clutched the length of printed paper in my fist, crumpled and torn. Ellis gingerly took it from me and held his flashlight over it. I saw his eyes scan the text, widening as he read the log of our own actions. His face went ashen. Neither of us said what we were both thinking, but we shared the same horrified understanding. Something had been monitoring us from the shadows, documenting every move. We left the archives immediately after that. Ellis stayed by my side as we hurried down the lobby and out into the cool early morning air. I remember standing in the empty parking lot under the flickering streetlight, sucking in gulps of crisp air as if I'd been drowning. Ellis lit a cigarette with trembling hands. He didn't normally smoke. We didn't really talk. What was there to say? Eventually he muttered that he wasn't sticking around for whatever this was. I couldn't blame him. I called in sick the next day. The official report was submitted for the night's incident was frustratingly sparse. A malfunctioning printer, a power surge, possible trespassers cited. We omitted the parts that would flag us as insane. Alvarez seemed to understand more than he let on. Perhaps the stack of printout I shoved in his hand spoke for itself. He quietly advised me to take some accrued leave while things were sorted out. I think he'd feared I'd quit on the spot, and truth be told, I nearly did. In the weeks that followed, an internal investigation combed through the archives. They found nothing concretely abnormal, at least nothing they acknowledged. IT blamed a software error for the phantom database activity. Maintenance found some old wiring issues that might help explain the lights and static. The camera that caught static was replaced. Superficially, the explanation was that a series of technical glitches and coincidences had stacked up, and in the end, management was all too eager to chalk it up to mundane causes and move on. The alternative, that something unseen and intelligent was invading our workplace, was not a possibility anyone wanted to entertain. Ellis transferred to a daytime post at a different facility shortly after. He and I got a drink together once before he left. He tried to laugh it off, saying maybe we both hallucinated, or maybe it was a weird government experiment we'd stumbled into. But his hands shook as he lifted his glass, and I noticed he kept darting his eyes to empty corners of the bar. We didn't really keep in touch after that. I don't blame him. Sometimes two people share an experience so terrible that seeing each other again just reminds you of it. As for me, I haven't returned to the stacks. Officially, I'm still on leave, burning through my vacation days as I decide what to do. I suspect Alvarez pulled strings to keep things quiet. He even hinted that if I wanted a recommendation for a different department, he'd help. I think he feels guilty. He admitted that odd things have happened in that building before, though never anything close to what I went through. He's retiring early, by the way. I can't blame him either. I wish I could say it's over now, that I left that nightmare behind at the archives. But even away from the building, I can't shake it. The sense that I'm under observation has burrowed under my skin. Every night in my small apartment, I feel eyes on me from the dark corners. In the quiet, I catch myself straining to hear that faint hum of machinery from the archive, as if it followed me. Sometimes I wake up to the sound of whispering static from my phone or radio, and I'm never sure if it's a dream or them. A few days ago, I opened my notebook from class and found a half-page filled with numbers and timestamps that I don't remember writing. It looked a bit like the format of those printouts. I tore the page out and burned it in the kitchen sink, but it did little to calm my nerves. Maybe I wrote it unconsciously, a manifestation of stress. That's what I tell myself because the alternative is too much to handle. I know one thing for certain. I'm not the only one. Whatever they are, they've been watching others long before I took that job, and they continue watching now. Cataloging, processing, observing. I was just unlucky enough to see a glimpse of their work, and once you've seen something like that, you can never unsee it. The world doesn't feel as solid as it used to. Reality has cracks, and I pick through. I'm trying to move on, to convince myself that life can return to normal. I go through the motions, eat, sleep, pretend to study, talk to friends about ordinary things. But some nights, like tonight, the memories won't let me be. On those nights I find myself writing it all down, as if putting it on paper might excise it from my head. That's what this account is. Maybe it's a cautionary tale, or maybe it's just therapy. I'm not even sure I'll ever show it to anyone. A part of me worries that by drawing attention to these events, I might be inviting their attention again. Perhaps I've said too much already. I can almost imagine a line appearing on a green screen somewhere, Subject D. Hayward, attempting disclosure. If such line exists, I hope it's followed by indifference rather than retaliation, because I can't fight them. I can only hope they've had their fill of me. In the end, I have no neat conclusion, no punchline of terror that ties everything up. The truth is, I'm left with fragments of an impossible puzzle and a gnawing feeling that the eyes in the dark are still on me. Maybe they always will be. Maybe all of us are just entries in an endless archive, stories being written without our knowledge. If you've made it this far, I'm sorry. I truly am. Because now you know about them, and I pray that doesn't make you interesting to them. I'll stop here. I have nothing else to offer except a warning. Some knowledge is not meant to be pursued. I thought I wanted answers, but now I only want to sleep through the night without that prickling feeling on my neck. Sometimes, ignorance really is bliss. If you ever find yourself alone in a quiet room and you feel like you're being watched, listen to that instinct. Leave the lights on, and maybe, just maybe, don't look too hard into the shadows. You might find that something stares back.